Good Friday evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us for Western Mass News at 6. I'm Chris Pisano. Let's take a quick look at what's making the latest headlines. Governor Charlie Baker announcing the conditions for Phase 2 of the Massachusetts reopening plan. We're digging deeper into what's needed to get outdoor dining up and running for local restaurants. Plus, we'll show you how banks and credit unions are getting ready to welcome back customers inside their lobbies. And we're getting answers on how small businesses are making up for profits lost during the pandemic. But we begin tonight continuing to follow that developing news out of Minnesota as one of the officers involved in the death of a man has been arrested.
Former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin has been charged by the Hennepin County Attorney's Office with murder and with manslaughter.
Now fired Minneapolis police officer who knelt on George Floyd's neck has been officially charged in his death. The local prosecutor saying it's the fastest they've ever charged a police officer. Chauvin was one of 4 officers who were fired after Floyd died while in police custody this week. During this morning's coverage of protests in Minneapolis, CNN correspondent Omar Jimenez was arrested by Minnesota State Patrol on live TV. During the live report, Jimenez fully cooperated with authorities and offered to move if he was standing in the wrong area. Despite having press credentials, Jimenez, his producer, and photographer were all detained. Minnesota's governor has since issued an apology to CNN. Jimenez and his crew were eventually released after about an hour in police custody. In Springfield today, local protesters came out demanding to see changes to police policy and practices in the wake of George Floyd's death. Western Mass News reporter Audrey Russo joins us now live with more. Audrey?
In the flyer for the local demonstration, protesters demanded that Springfield Police and area police departments review their use of force policies. In speaking with protesters at the event, they too say they wanted to see changes. This as local leaders are responding and reacting tonight to the unfolding scene in Minneapolis.
It wasn't an accidental incident, it was murder. He did it with intent.
Protesters in Springfield demonstrating over the death of George Floyd in Minneapolis. A police officer was recorded holding his knee down on Floyd's neck for several minutes, as Floyd stated he couldn't breathe and was in pain. That officer has since been fired and arrested, but local protesters say it brings to light once more the problems between police and people of color.
I know like 4 or 5 police officers, but I should know more. And I feel like if they know us, they wouldn't want to kill us.
In the flyer for the local demonstration, protesters called for area police departments to review their use of force policies. Western Mass News obtained a copy of Springfield PD's use of force policy. There is no mention of using airway restricting tactics, but Springfield City Councilor Orlando Ramos says no mention may no longer be enough.
I think that we've reached a point, unfortunately, where we may have to legislate it and make sure that there is no, we may have to explicitly state it in the policy that that's, any sort of force that involves cutting off a person's airway should not be acceptable.
I'll be the first one to stand up for my police department, but I'll also be the first one to say when, something's wrong.
We spoke with Springfield Mayor Dominic Sarno, who says he condemns what happened to Floyd in Minneapolis. As some protests in the Midwestern city have turned to riots, Sarno tells Western Mass News he wants to see demonstrations remain peaceful.
There's protesters who have been hurt or killed. And you can't have places being burned down, stores of hardworking people, and the police station was burned down.
Sarno says the use of force should be considered a last resort among his officers.
That is the last thing in he or she, our brave and dedicated police officers' arsenal to do when they're trying to protect residents' lives.
Congressman Richard Neal also weighing in on what he says needs to change.
Building better community relations and better understanding would go a long way toward, I think, having the police exercise their proper and responsible role, and at the same time understanding that the civil rights and civil liberties of people based upon skin color cannot be violated.
Local protesters say Floyd's death resonates from Minneapolis to Massachusetts.
It devastated the people of color worldwide.
Springfield police have sent us a statement on the use of force policy. Commissioner Clapperud says in part, quote, "We emphasize on keeping body weight off areas of the body such as the head, neck, throat, and spine, and we stress de-escalation, minimizing the need to use force, focusing on communication skills." Reporting live in Springfield, I'm Audrey Rousseau for Western Mass News.
Audrey, thank you for that live report. And you can get news when you want it, where you want it, and how you want it with the new free Western Mass News streaming app. Be sure to download it today to your mobile and streaming devices. Now back to our coronavirus pandemic coverage. Governor Charlie Baker announcing new information today in phase 2 of the state's reopening plan, giving many restaurant owners some good news and the green light to start preparing to open their doors. Western Mass News reporter Lindsay Kane live for us in Springfield tonight with more. Lindsay?
Chris, one local restaurant owner tells me that they've been speculating about new regulations, and now that they finally have some direction, they'll be able to open again soon.
It's exciting, and we're taking it a minute and a second at a time.
Governor Charlie Baker announcing on Friday news people in the restaurant industry have been waiting to hear when and how they can open their doors again.
We're excited at the opportunity to be able to reopen. It's been a few months now, and to lose your business when you're at the height of your best year is a tough hit.
Under phase 2 of the state's reopening plan, restaurants are allowed to open for outdoor dining, with indoor dining allowed later in phase 2. Owner of Center Square Grill in East Longmeadow, William Collins, tells Western Mass News that he's been preparing for all possibilities for what regulations will be in place to reopen.
I've obviously been monitoring what bordering states are doing and going out and dining to see what some other businesses are doing. I take this very seriously.
While many restaurants around the state begin to expand or start outdoor dining to adhere to the regulations, Town Clerk for East Longmeadow, Jeannie Quagletti, tells Western Mass News over the phone that the logistics are complex.
They want to probably put up tents, maybe that will take up parking spaces. So how's that going to affect local businesses and capacity? I know that people are doing sidewalk dining, but then you get into town property.
She says there's a state bill in the works granting temporary liquor licensing for outdoor dining, helping businesses get back on their feet faster, something East Longmeadow officials are hoping to see.
The town of East Longmeadow has a lot of restaurants in town. It's a viable part of the town. They've been hard hit, and it's been very difficult for restaurant owners, for residents, for everyone.
But with more clarity on a reopening plan, Collins says it's exciting to start prepping.
We're going to work 24 hours a day until we're ready to go so that we can come back better than we've ever been.
Officials are anticipating a June 8th start, but will make the final call on June 6th. Live in Springfield, Lindsay Kane, Western Mass News.
Lindsay, thank you for that live report. And continuing our team coverage on COVID-19, one by one, banks and credit unions across the state have been putting protocols in place to allow their customers back in. Western Mass News reporter Kayla Burton getting answers about what safety measures are being implemented for one local credit union hoping to reopen for face-to-face transactions by next week.
Freedom Credit Union in Springfield has been operating throughout the coronavirus pandemic, but like other banking institutions, customers have been kept outside.
It's difficult not having people come in. You can service a lot more people when they come into the office, obviously, when you only have one drive-up, maybe 2 employees working it, but one transaction at a time, one car at a time. So it's a lot slower.
Customers have been limited to drive-through, online, and phone transactions. So CEO and President Glenn Welch tells Western Mass News they're excited to welcome people back inside all 10 of their branches, following the state's reopening guidelines.
We're trying to figure out right now how many people we can have in each of our buildings at a time, which will depend on the square footage. And then we can only have 25% of that by the governor's guidelines. We'll figure that out in the next few days.
Beginning next week, plexiglass partitions will be up throughout the lobby here so customers can safely come back inside.
We're working to open up our lobbies with plexiglass shields between teller line and members that come in. We plexiglass on the desk for member services. We're going to have floor markers for spacing, social distancing.
Welch says hand sanitizers, gloves, and masks will also be required, as well as other protections.
We'll probably have somebody at the door who has to limit the number of people, almost like a bouncer, but at a credit union.
Welch says with safety their top priority, he anticipates doors will reopen soon.
By the end of next week, we should have our facilities all ready to accept people to come into the lobbies, but then we have to have a plan of action.
Reporting for Western Mass News, I'm Kayla Burton.